Grand Rising, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. 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 Grand Rising, everybody. All right. Let's see who we have out here this rising. Grand Rising, I am Flying Squirrel. Grand Rising, LJ Free. Rich Natilla. Grand Rising, Alfred Jones. Prince William County representing. Good to see everyone in here this rising. Hopefully everyone had a restful night and a great morning. So, hope everyone's doing well. No sellout. Can you give us a mic check so we can make sure everybody can hear you?
2 2 1 2. Mic check. Mic check. Grand Rising, y'all. Peace, peace. Is that enough?
Give us some ones if y'all can hear us in the chat. Make sure we got our levels right. We're coming through loud and clear. Make sure everyone can hear. No sellout.
Two 2 1 2.
All right. Go ahead and get this rolled on the show. Thank you everyone for giving us that feedback from the mic check. So what did we learn yesterday from the Cherokees dealing with New Spain and vice royalty? Well, we learned that Catholic Church played a more dominant role than anticipated, and that our tribes were not just confined, if you will, to the Americas. We've been fighting on many different continents. Now, we'll continue to find out more about that today. But before we do that, one of the things I want to go over, those that are just tuning in and who don't know who we are and what we're about. This is the Cab Grand Rising Show, and our mission, which can be found on our website at thetitanousassembly.com, is that we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising up indigenous American voices by using genealogy, also known as family history, which is the study of families and the tracing of their lineage and history. Genealogists use oral interviews, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about a family and to demonstrate kinship and pedigrees excuse me, of its members. And our goal, plain and simple, is to make sure that we help those who want to tie into their tribes do their genealogy, find their tribe, and if they so choose, join their tribe, help their tribe, and not only help their tribe become self-sufficient, but help themselves and their community become self-sufficient. Some of our core values at Autochthonous Assembly is our company is essential to our success and serves as a lens through which we evaluate every business decision. And there are 4 core values that we adhere to. Integrity. Know and do what is right. Respect. Treating others the way you want to be treated. Responsibility. Embrace opportunities to contribute. And servant leadership. Serve the common good. So that's a brief synopsis of Autochthonous Assembly and what we're here for. And we're here to help, for lack of better terms. Behind Flying Squirrel said great speech. That all that information is on the website, but sometimes people don't read it. They just go strictly for the information because they're trying to get their genealogy done. So I want to make sure when people come to our channel or they come to this YouTube channel, they understand what we're here for. So, my name is TMH. People call me Thomas. And I'm happy to be here. And then we also have No Sellout, who you'll hear chiming in. He's what I call our health expert. And then we have Bones McCoy. He'll be joining us later. So we're pretty much the 3, I guess for lack of a better term, main voices you've been hearing. But there are a lot more people that make up Autochthonous Assembly. You'll hear from James Flames, aka Do the Vision, aka Choctaw Jimmy. Hopefully he'll be joining us later. He is what I call our aficionado of all things American Indian, being that he has contact with his tribe and he has spoken with his elders. He's about to say something. No Sellout?
Nope, just agreeing.
So, did you have a good day yesterday?
Yeah, it was a pretty good day.
Okay.
How about yourself?
We do training at the office here, so I actually had an opportunity to meet a gentleman who's from Georgia. Last name is Harvey. And, we had a conversation about his genealogy. Basically gave him some basic information. We'll be sitting down and talking on Sunday to help him with his genealogy and go over his genealogy. But sharp young brother. So shout out to Mr. Harvey. Just doing what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool beans. Is that you, Bones?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out.
There's a phone number in here, 44553.
Well, don't tell people what it is.
So, who are you? Can you state your name, please?
Yeah. All right. We'll find out one day.
Well, if they don't say something, they're about to get kicked off.
No, I just wanted to listen in.
No,
Yeah, you can listen in on the YouTube stream.
yeah, you gotta speak up. Speak now, forever hold your peace. No. Okay. Hopefully next time you'll speak. With that being said, activate the waiting room. If you're gonna dial into the number, that's fine, but excuse me. But if you're gonna speak to you, please speak back so we know who you are and what it is that you wish to say. So, because if not, you'll get kicked off. And when I kick you off, you're not coming back because you're not gonna be allowed to come back. So that's for future reference. I'm flying squirrel set hotline playing. No sell, are you ready to get this show on the road?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat. So we're continuing with the Viceroyalty of New Spain, which is the arm of Spain that basically controls all the territories, and the Chickamauga, who are the ones that separated from the Cherokee to do their own thing, are the proxy for the Viceroyalty of Spain. So that's the reason why we're still on the Viceroyalty. So you can see what type of impact not only the Cherokee had, but the Viceroyalty had with not just America, but with West Africa, Asia, and Europe, and the West Indies. Go ahead and put this link in the chat. And we're going to be reading from the 18th century military conflict. So now we get into the military conflicts. And we're going from there. So it's time to get those hard hats on. And whenever you're ready to go, no sell out.
Are we starting with that?
Yep.
The conflicts.
The 18th century military conflicts. Yep. New Spain.
Alright. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. The first century. All right. Soldado de Cuera in colonial Mexico. Okay. Grand Rising, everybody. All right. The first century that saw the Bourbons on the Spanish throne coincided with a series of global conflicts that pitted primarily France against Great Britain. Spain, as an ally of Bourbon France, was drawn into these conflicts. Mike check. Can anybody hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, make sure. In fact, part of the motivation for the Bourbon reforms was the perceived need to prepare the empire administratively, economically, and militarily for what was the next expected war. The 7 Years' War proved to be the catalyst for most of the reforms in the overseas possessions, just like the War of the Spanish Succession had been for the reforms on the peninsula. In 1720, the Villasur expedition from Santa Fe met and attempted to parley with French allied Pawnee in what is now Nebraska. Negotiations were unsuccessful and a battle ensued. The Spanish were badly defeated, with only 13 managing to return to New Mexico. Rich? Although this was a small engagement, it is significant in that it was the deepest penetration of the Spanish into the Great Plains, establishing the limits to Spanish expansion and influence there.
Hold up.
The War of
Stop.
Jenkins'
Hold up. Stop
Ear.
for a second.
broke out in 1739 between the Spanish and British
Stop. Hold on for a second. So, first two paragraphs, it mentions, the first paragraph, it mentions the 7-Year War, right? And it goes on to say reforms were perceived needed to prepare the empire administratively, economically, military for what was the next expected war. So they expected this war to come out. So this is, as James Flames always tells us, this was actually the first World War, because they basically carried 5 territories. And it said proved to be the catalyst for most of the reforms in the overseas possessions, just like the War of the Spanish Succession, and had been for the reforms of the peninsula. And then in 1720, the Villoso expedition from Santa Fe met and attempted to parley with French ally Pawnee in what is now Nebraska. So are they saying that Pawnee, the area of Pawnee, was what it was called, and now it's called Nebraska? That's number one. Because now we got to find out what Pawnee is. Yep. And then number 2, it says negotiations were unsuccessful and battle ensued. The Spanish were badly defeated, with only 13 managing to return to New Mexico. So I wonder how many left if only 13 made it back.
I know, right? They better went straight to procreating.
Say again?
I said they better went straight to procreating when they got back.
Because that's some
lost some men. You said the Pawnee. You gonna talk about the Pawnee, or you wanna? We'll come back to that. Just a little. I guess the top. Just the Pawnee are Plains Indian tribe who are headquartered in Pawnee, Oklahoma. Pawnee people are enrolled in federally recognized Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma, and historically they lived in Nebraska and Kansas. In the Pawnee language, the Pawnee people refer to themselves as Chatiks, or men of men, or Chatiks, I don't know how to pronounce these. So, all right, and that's the Pawnee people.
All right, cool. So at one particular time, that was called Pawnee, which is now Nebraska. Interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right. We are at the War of Jenkins' Ear, I believe. You taught me up there, right?
Yep.
With the 3rd grade, right?
Yeah.
So the War of Jenkins' Ear broke out in 1739 between the Spanish and the British and was confined to the Caribbean and Georgia. The major action in the War of Jenkins' Ear was a major amphibious attack launched by the British under Admiral Edward Vernon in March 1741 against Cartagena de Indias, one of Spain's major gold trading ports in the Caribbean, today Colombia. Although this episode is largely forgotten, and it ended in a decisive victory for Spain, who managed to prolong its control of the Caribbean and indeed secure the Spanish Main until the 19th century. Following the French and Indian War, /7 Years' War, the British troops invaded and captured the Spanish cities of Havana in Cuba and Manila in the Philippines in 1762. The Treaty of Paris, 1763, gave Spain control over the Louisiana part of New France, including New Orleans, creating a Spanish empire that stretched from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. But Spain also ceded Florida to Great Britain in order to regain Cuba, which the British occupied during the war. Louisiana settlers, hoping to restore the territory to France, in the bloodless rebellion of 1768, forced the Louisiana governor Antonio de Ulloa, I would assume the Spanish, to flee to Spain. The rebellion was crushed in 1769 by the next governor, Alejandro O'Reilly, who executed 5 of the conspirators. The Louisiana Territory was to be administered by the superiors in Cuba with a governor on site in New Orleans.
Stop right there.
Oh, I will.
First of all, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, following the 7-Year War, the British troops invaded and captured Spanish cities of Havana, Cuba, and Manila in the Philippines. And then the Treaty of Paris happened in 1763 and gave Spain control over Louisiana, part of New France, which is New Orleans, right? Creating a Spanish empire that stretched from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. That's basically 2/3 of the United States.
Not to the Atlantic. No other way. To the Pacific.
But it says, but Spain also ceded Florida to Great Britain in order to regain Cuba. So these Bamas is trading states like you trade cards. You give us Cuba, we'll give you Spain.
Mm.
Then there was a bloodless rebellion in 1768 and forced Louisiana governor Antonio de
Whatever they want to do with that.
to flee to Spain. The rebellion was crushed in 1769 by the next governor, Alejandro O'Reilly. So here's a question. If it was a bloodless rebellion, why would the governor have to flee? I think we got to take a look at the rebellion of 1768.
Sound like he was scared of something.
Because somebody got to explain it. So let's see. Let me go ahead and put this in the chat. Time to get the hard hats on. Free says bloodless rebellion sounds like a civil war. Exactly. So it goes on to read, the rebellion of 1768 was an unsuccessful attempt by Creole and German settlers around New Orleans, Louisiana, to stop handover of the French Louisiana territory to Spain, as had been stipulated in the 1762 Treaty of Fontainebleau. The rebellion aimed to force new Spanish Louisiana governor Antonio de Ulloa to leave New Orleans and return to Spain, but his replacement, Alejandro O'Reilly, was able to crush the rebellion, execute 5 of its ringleaders, and firmly establish Spanish-owned territory. The division said started from the bottom, now I'm still here. So how do you have a bloodless revolt and then you have 5 people executed? Did I miss something?
Does executed mean go away? Or are you talking about like dead?
Sound like dead. What do you mean when you execute people? You kill them, right? Maybe I need to
extradite, expose, execute. Okay, yeah, they did.
Let me read it again. It says, but his replacement, Alejandro O'Reilly, was able to crush the rebellion, execute 5 of its ringleaders, and firmly establish Spanish law, right, in the territory. So then it goes into the background. In the Treaty of Paris, at the conclusion of the French and Indian War, or the 7-Year War, France lost all of its territories on the North American continent, including Canada. Now, this was something I did not know about. It said France lost all of its territories on the North American continent, including Canada, Illinois country, and Louisiana. It got to keep its French West Indies islands in the Caribbean, and also its islands at St. Pierre and Miquelon. And then it says Great Britain acquired Canada and all the land on the east bank of the Mississippi River and its tributaries. As compensation for losses elsewhere, France handed over control of New Orleans and all the land on the west bank of the Mississippi River and its tributaries to their Spanish allies. So hold on. After the Treaty of Paris, all of Canada was under Great Britain's rule. So what did that do for the alliance that the Haudenosaunee had with France.
Hmm.
Maybe James can tell us about that. Because remember, those Acadians had been there, had been developing relationships with them for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Due Division says Governor O'Reilly auto parts equals Irish plus Spanish plus Irish.
Yeah, I was like looking at the name when I read it, like, okay, Alejandro. Oh, O'Reilly.
Grand Rising, David Corey. Here's a question though. But how does that affect the relationship between the Haudenosaunee and the Britons? Because they were dealing with the French or the Acadians. But now Spain seceded all of that land in Canada to Great Britain. And then they have everything. It says also too that France handed over control of New Orleans and all the land of the west bank of Mississippi River and its tributaries and their Spanish allies. And so, what am I missing? Then it goes on and reads, implementation of the turnover was slow in North America, with the French continuing to expand its villages, including founding St. Louis, Missouri. In April 1764, the first Spanish governor, Jean-Jacques Blas Abadi, a French official who was administering Louisiana for the Spanish, took office and heard complaints from among the natives. The Abadi died from illness on February 4, 1765. The senior military officer in the colonial captain, Charles Philip Aubrey, a French officer, assumed control. A merchant, Jean Milhet, sailed to France in an unsuccessful attempt to persuade Louis XV to rescind the decision, but the king did not grant him an audience. Due Division says, now you see why these tribes were fighting each other. As the Europeans switched in ownership, the tribes were left to fend for themselves. Wow. So they were just basically just swapping ownership and then letting the Indians know after the fact. The Indians like, okay, so what we doing? That's crazy. So now you have Canada, which was once owned by the French. Now the French handed over all that land, all of Canada, over to Great Britain. They trade land like we trade baseball cards and Pokemon cards and things of that nature. I know I'm telling my age. Okay. Eviction of Ulloa. And on March 5th, 1766, a new governor Ulloa arrived, but brought with him only 75 soldiers, and did not even raise the Spanish flag over the place d'armes. Ulloa's, I guess because it's double L, superiors were in Cuba, and were it virtually ignored his requests, including replacing the French currency with pesos. Although fluent in French, Ulloa was to exacerbate his problems by living outside the New Orleans at La Belize, Louisiana. In the summer of 1768, Ulloa announced plans to crack down on Louisiana's smuggling operations by closing the mouth of the Mississippi to only one channel to improve their own security. At the same time, he also announced that Louisiana would no longer trade with France or any of its colonies, consistent with the policy in the other Spanish possessions. It says, so the French handed over all their territories in 1763, only to help turn the tide of the war in America a few years later. That's what it sounds like. And then Doodle says, this is why the French sided with the colonies during the Revolutionary War. They wanted their land back. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Double agents, triple agents? Come on, man. This is just a bunch of tomfoolery, if you ask. A bunch of land grabbing.
Indian giving.
Tell me about it. In the fall of 1768, Dennis Nichols Foucault, who was the commissary for Louisiana under the French, and had continued the position under the Spanish during the transition, the Nicolas Chauvin de la Fresnier, who was the Louisiana Attorney General under the French and also continuing under the Spanish, hatched a plot to force the governor out. They just doing all kind of stuff, man. So this is all dealing with the Louisiana Rebellion of 1768 that was supposed to been bloodless.
Mm-hmm.
It don't sound bloodless to me, or am I missing something?
Allegedly.
Yeah, tell me about it. Alright, so that was the Louisiana Rebellion of 1768. I just wanted to give you some context so we can get back to Spain. So where were we at? It's a big mess. Because you have so much stuff happening at the same time. It's crazy. So now we're at the paragraph right above the picture of Bernardo de Galvez, where it reads the 21 Northern Missions in present-day California. Doodle says the British forced the Acadians south from Canada, up Ohio Valley into the Mississippi Delta.
You said we're at the 21?
Yeah, the 21 Northern Mission, present-day California. So whenever you're ready, you can read that.
All right. The 21 northern missions in present-day California, U.S., were established along California's El Camino Real from 1769. In an effort to exclude Britain and Russia from the Eastern Pacific, King Charles III of Spain sent forth from Mexico a number of expeditions to the Pacific Northwest between 1774 and 1793. Spain's long-held claims and navigation rights were strengthened, and settlement and forts were built in Nootka Sound, Alaska. Spain entered the American Revolutionary War as an ally of the United States and France in June 1779. From September 1779 to May 1781, Bernardo de Galvez led an army in a campaign along the Gulf Coast against the British. Galvez's army consisted of Spanish regulars from throughout Latin America and a militia which consisted of mostly Acadians along with Creoles, Germans, and Native Americans. Galvez's army engaged and defeated the British in battles fought at Manchac and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Natchez, Mississippi, Mobile, Alabama, and Pensacola, Florida. The loss of Mobile and Pensacola left the British with no bases along the Gulf Coast. In 1782, forces under Galvez's overall command captured the British naval base at Nassau.
Stop.
New Providence Island in the Bahamas.
Stop.
Galvez was angry. No.
Hold on. Grand Rising Bones.
Mostly what? Who? Peace, Bones. You want me to run it back? I can run it back.
Yeah, run that back right quick. Run that back.
It's kind of low too on the other end.
What was that?
Okay.
Bones?
I'm low.
Yeah, he was kind of low.
All right, hold on. Give me a second.
Hold on, I'm about to switch headphones anyway. I'm not using the ones that I usually use.
Alright, I turned you up. Let me know if that's better.
Mic check, mic check. 1 2 1 2 2 2 1 2. Grand Rising. How y'all doing?
Let us know that if he's coming in better.
Yeah, clear.
Okay.
Louder.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. I'm switching headphones anyway. Hold up. Hold up. Mic check. Hold up.
Yeah, they say they hear you clearly.
Mic check.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay.
So go back and read that whole paragraph over, starting with the Spain ended the American Revolutionary War.
Gotcha.
Because there was something to do to one of us not to miss. So
Spain. Was that it? Was it Spain?
yeah.
Okay. Spain entered. No, I'm just joking. Spain entered the American Revolutionary War as an ally of the United States and France in June 1779. From September 1779 to May 1781, Bernardo de Galvez led an army in a campaign along the Gulf Coast against the British. Galvez's army consisted of Spanish regulars from throughout Latin America and a militia which consisted of mostly Acadians, along with Creoles, Germans, and Native Americans.
And I think that's where he wanted you to stop. He said red light at the Acadians. He said stop at the Acadians. So let's take a look at the Acadians, shall we?
I'd like to.
Doodle Vision says Acadians and Creoles, two different groups. So I'll go ahead and read this part. The Acadians, French Acadians, are descendants of French colonists who settled in Acadia during the 17th and 18th century, some of whom are also descendants from the indigenous peoples of the region. The colony was located in what is now eastern Canada's Maritime Province, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island, as well as part of Quebec. In present-day Maine, to the Kennebec River. Acadia was a distinctively separate colony of New France. It was geographically and administratively separate from the French colony of Canada, modern-day Quebec. As a result, the Acadians and Québécois developed two distinct histories and cultures. They also developed a slightly different French language. France has one official language, and to accomplish this, they have an administration in charge of the language. Hold on. Come on in, James. It says, as a result, the Acadians and Québécois developed two distinct histories and cultures. They also developed a slightly different French language. France was one official language, and to accomplish this, they have an administration in charge of the language. Since the Acadians were separated from this council, their French language evolved independently, and Acadians retained several elements of the 17th century French that have disappeared in France. The settlers whose descendants became Acadians came from many areas in France, but especially regions such as Ile-de-France, Normandy, Brittany, Poitou, and Aquitaine. Acadian family names have come from many years in France. For example, the Mellets are from Paris, the LeBlancs of Normandy. The surname Millican is from Brittany, and those with the surnames Bastarache and Basque came from Aquitaine. During the French and Indian War, the Northern American theater of the 7 Years' War, British colony officers suspected Acadians were aligned with France after finding some Acadians fighting alongside French troops at Fort Beauséjour. Though most Acadians remained neutral during the French and Indian War, the British, together with New England legislature and militia, carried out the Great Expulsion, the Grand Dérangement, of the Acadians during 1755 through 1764 period, they deported approximately 11,500 Acadians from the Maritime region. Approximately one-third perished from disease and drowning. The result was what one historian described as an ethnic cleansing of the Acadians, from maritime Canada. Other historians indicate that this deportation was similar to other deportations of that time period. Most Acadians were deported to various American colonies, where many were forced in servitude or marginal lifestyles. Some Acadians were deported to England, to the Caribbean, and some were deported to France. After being expelled to France, many Acadians were eventually recruited by the Spanish government to migrate to present-day Louisiana state, known then as the Spanish colony Louisiana, where they developed what became known as Cajun culture. In time, some Acadians returned to the maritime province of Canada, mainly to New Brunswick, because they were barred by the British from resettling their lands and villages in what became Nova Scotia before the U.S. Revolutionary War. The Crown settled New England planters in former Acadian communities and farmland, as well as loyalists after the war, including nearly 3,000 black loyalists who were freed slaves. British policy was to assimilate Acadians with the local populations where they resettled. Acadians speak a variety of French called Acadian French. Many of those in Moncton area speak Chiac English. Louisiana Cajun descendants speak a variety of American English called Cajun English, with many also speaking Cajun French, a close relative of Acadian French, from Canada but influenced by Spanish and West African languages. So, James, can you help straighten all this out, please, sir? Grand Rising Pamela Hall.
Yes, sir. Greetings, one and all, Grand Rising. If you go back to the beginning, because it tells you the makeup of the Acadians, it says that they were a mixture of who? It's starting naming all these different places in French, but it's Normandy and all these other places. Again, your Vikings, but it was a mixture of Vikings and who did it say who when they settled? They
Uh,
say indigenous people.
yeah, it said, hold on.
I know it was up toward the beginning when you started reading.
Yeah,
You said Latin, yeah, Acadians along with Creoles, Germans, Native Americans.
yeah, it says, who settled in Acadia during the 17th, 18th centuries, some of whom are descendants from the indigenous peoples of the region. The
Got it.
col-
Right there, right there, right there, right there, right there.
Hmm.
All they were doing was connecting with their long lost this is cousins. These are the same folk, these same Vikings that were pushed out of Mesoamerica that stayed in that region. Which is why again, some of your people that are claiming to be your people but are not your people, but they claim to be indigenous, have B blood type. And I know it's been a while since we talked about blood type. So now things are gonna start making sense. They were already here. They've been here for thousands of years. They were just reconnecting with the people in that region. So now you see all the bouncing back and forth. And again, the tribes were caught in the middle. Because if one day you're doing fur trade with the French, and the next day, you the Spanish are in charge, and then you come back again, and the British are in charge. It's like, what in the world is going on? So this is causing conflict between the tribes because it was not a smooth transition. There had to be a lapse or a layover as the royalties decided, hey, this is now your land, this is now your land. Well, guess what? Those troops are going to have to leave, and if let's just say for Chickasaw were loyal to the British, and then you turn around and then they have to say, well, this is Spanish territory where I don't like the Spanish. So now you got a conflict between the Chickasaw and the Choctaw, who were loyal to the Spanish. You see what I'm saying? This is all part of their game, and it's amazing that the name of that area was called Pawnee, which is now Nebraska, because we all pawns in the game. You see, all this is tying in, and it begins to make it makes more sense. The Acadians were already in that land, and they were forced down. Now, and this is how you can tell the difference, even without really paying attention to them. Don't look necessarily look at their skin tone. That Cajuns, what we call Cajuns or Acadians, have a harsh. They're when they speak, it's harsh because it's that Germanic, like ha, ha, and Creoles are it's smooth when they talk. So that's how you're able to tell the difference without even knowing who they are. Just listen to how they talk, because those Acadians again are Vikings. They have a harsher tone. Those are again your wood shoe wearing Dutch. They speak very harshly, where those Creoles is very smooth. So the difference between the Germanic languages speaking people and the Ladino speaking people. I yield the mic.
Come on, man. I gotta tighten up my hard hat. All that debris that just fell on me, bro.
I know, right? I don't know how they left the site, man. I don't know. I don't even know.
He come in and he dropped the mic, and this is what happens after he dropped the mic. There's normally an explosion. So it's time to clear out the debris. And we can go back to the go back to the paragraph that you was reading. This is crazy. Grand Rising, Marlon P. Let's see. So we're back on Spain, New Spain again. Talking about the vice royalty. And let's see. Do the vision says, sorry, so now let's go west. Really? So I'll just pick up where you left off. No, the loss of Mobile and Pensacola left the British with no bases along the Gulf Coast. In 1782, forces under Galvez overall command captured the British naval base at Nassau on New Providence Island in the Bahamas. Galvez was angry at the operation and had proceeded against his orders to cancel and ordered the arrest and imprisonment of Francisco de Miranda, aide-de-camp of Juan Miguel Cahigal. The commander of the expedition, Miranda, later ascribed this action on the part of Galvez to jealousy of Cahigal's success. In the Second Treaty of Paris, 1783, which ended the American Revolution, Great Britain returned control to Florida back to Spain in exchange for the Bahamas. Okay, here we go again. Spain then controlled over the Mississippi River south 3230 north latitude, and in what is known as Spanish conspiracy, hoped to gain control of Louisiana and all the West. These hopes ended when Spain was pressured into signing Pinckney's Treaty in 1795. France reacquired Louisiana from Spain in the secret Treaty of San Ildefonso in 1800. The United States bought the territory from France in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. This is what James was talking about. So it says, Spain was pressured into signing the Pinckney's Treaty. So what was Pinckney's Treaty? Now, put this in the chat. Pinckney's Treaty, Pinckney's Treaty, also commonly known as the Treaty of San Lorenzo, or the Treaty of Madrid, was signed in San Lorenzo del Escorial on October 27, 1795, and established intentions of friendship between the United States and Spain. It also defined the border between the United States and Spanish Florida and guaranteed the United States navigation rights on the Mississippi River. With this agreement, the first phase of the ongoing border dispute between the two nations in this region, commonly called West Florida Controversy, came to a close. The treaty's full title is Treaty of Friendship, Limits, and Navigation between Spain and the United States. Thomas Pickening negotiated the treaty for the United States, and Don Manuel de Godoy represented Spain. It was presented to the United States Senate on February 26, 1796, and after debate was ratified on March 7, 1796. It was ratified by Spain on April 25, 1796, and ratifications were exchanged on that date. The treaty was proclaimed on August 3, 1796. So that was the basis of Pickering's treaty. So now we're going to go back to Spain. Oak Cliff Tip says Picnic. Okay. So let's look at the Treaty of San Ildefonso in 1800. Now this was signed 4 years after Pickering's treaty. And this is the third treaty of San Ildefonso. Was a secret agreement signed on October 1st, 1800 between the Spanish Empire and the First French Republic, by which Spain agreed in principle to exchange their North American colony of Louisiana for territories in Tuscany. The terms were later confirmed by the March 1801 Treaty of Aranjuez. For much of the 18th century, France and Spain were allies, but after the execution of Louis XVI in 1793, Spain joined the war of the First Coalition against French First Republic, but was defeated in the War of Pyrenees. In August 1795, Spain and France agreed to the Peace of Basel. Excuse me. In Spain, with Spain ceding their half of the island of Hispaniola and the modern Dominican Republic in 1797, Second Treaty of San Ildefonso, Spain allied with France in the War of the Second Coalition and declared war on Britain. This resulted in the loss of Trinidad and, more seriously, Minorca, which Britain occupied from 1708 to 1782, and whose recovery was the major achievement of Spain's participation in 1778 and 1783 Anglo-French War. Its loss damaged the prestige of Spanish government, while the British naval blockade severely impacted the economy, which was highly dependent on trade with its South American colonies, particularly the import of silver from Mexico. Remember, there was a lot of money that was coming from those silver mines. The effect was to place the Spanish government under severe political and financial pressure, the national debt increasing eightfold between 1793 and 1798. Louisiana was only part of Spain's immense empire in the Americas, which it received as a result of the 1763 Treaty of Paris. Preventing encroachment by American settlers into the Mississippi Basin was costly and risked conflict with the U.S. Most merchant ships Spain relied on to evade the British blockade. Colonies were viewed as valuable assets. The loss of the sugar island of Saint Dominique, Martinique, and Guadeloupe between 1791 and 1794 had a huge impact on French business. Restoring them was a priority, and when Napoleon seized power in November 1799 in the coup d'État Brumaire, he and his deputy Charles Talleyrand emphasized French expansion overseas. Their strategy had a number of parts, one being the 1798 and 1801 Egyptian campaign, intended in part to strengthen French trading interests in the region. In South America, Talleyrand sought to move the border between French Guiana and Portuguese Brazil south to Algarve and Amper River, taking a large part of northern Brazil. A third was the restoration of New France in North America, lost after 1756 to 1763, 7 Years' War, with Louisiana providing raw materials for French plantations in the Caribbean. Doodle Vision says sugar was like cocaine to the Europeans. Wow. The combination of French ambition and Spanish weakness made the return of Louisiana attractive to both, especially as Spain was being drawn into disputes with the U.S. over navigation rights on the Mississippi River. Talleyrand claimed French possession of Louisiana would allow them to protect Spanish South America from both Britain and the U.S. The treaty was negotiated by French General Louis Alexandre Berthier and the Spanish former Chief Minister Mariano Luis de Urquijo. In addition to Louisiana, Berthier was instructed to demand the Spanish colonies of East Florida and West Florida plus 10 Spanish warships. He says even to this day, the French are known for its pastries. Urquijo rejected the request for the Floridas, but agreed Louisiana plus 6 ships of war in good condition, built for 74 guns, armed and equipped and ready to receive French crews and supplies. In return, Charles IV wanted compensation for his son-in-law's Infanta Duke of Parma, since France wanted to annex his inheritance of the Duchy of Parma. Details were vague. Clause II of the treaty simply stated, it may consist of Tuscany, or the 3 Roman legations, or of any other continental province of Italy, which form a rounded state. Urquijo insisted Spain would hand over Louisiana and the ships only once France confirmed which Italian territories it would receive in return. Finally, the terms reaffirmed the alliance between France and Spain, agreed in 1796, Second Treaty of San Ildefonso. Grand Rising Copper Color Queen, Grand Rising Golden Moon.
Peace, everyone.
Man, this sounds like a cluster. I'm going to leave it at that. He says, now you see why Chief Warhorse says she woke up one day and it was in Louisiana, but she never moved from West Florida. Yeah, I see exactly how that happened. Okay. So now I'm back on Spain. I'll go ahead and put the link back in.
What else that would mean too?
Say what?
That would explain why some records are hard to find. Because at different points in history, somebody else was running that land. So somebody else has the records.
Right. So we would need to be actually looking at either Spain or France, like James was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and reread the last part of the sentence. It says, these hopes ended when Spain was pressured into signing Pinckney's Treaty in 1795. France required Louisiana from Spain in a secret treaty of San Ildefonso in 1800. The United States bought the territory from France in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. New Spain claimed the entire west coast of North America, therefore considered the Russian fur trading activity in Alaska, which began in the middle to the late 18th century, an encroachment and threat Likewise, the exploration of the northwest coast by Captain James Cook of British Navy and the subsequent fur trading activities by British ships was considered an encroachment of Spanish territory. To protect and strengthen its claim, New Spain sent a number of expeditions to the Pacific Northwest. Between 1774, 1793, and 1789, a naval outpost called Santa Cruz de Nuca, or just Nuca, was established at Friendly Cove in Nootka Sound, or Yukot, Vancouver Island. It was protected by an artillery land battery called Fort San Miguel. Santa Cruz de Nuca was the northernmost establishment of New Spain. It was the first European colony in what is now the province of British Columbia, and the only Spanish settlement in what is now Canada.
Do everybody know this? At certain times they'd be like Spanish, French, English, but then when they be talking about them colonists, they always let you know they all European.
Mm-hmm. Santa Cruz de Nuca remained under the control of New Spain until 1795, when it was abandoned under the terms of the Third Nootka Convention. Another outpost intended to replace Santa Cruz de Nuca was partially built in Nia Bay, on the southern side of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, in what is now the United States of Washington. Nia Bay was known as Bahia de Núñez Gaona in New Spain, and the outpost there was referred to as Fuca. It was abandoned, partially finished, in 1792. Its personnel, livestock, cannons, and ammunition were transferred to Nuca. In 1789, at Santa Cruz de Nuca, a conflict occurred between the Spanish naval officer Esteban Jose Martinez and the British merchant James Colnet, triggering the Nootka Crisis, which grew into an international incident and the threat of war between Britain and Spain. The first Nootka Convention averted the war, but left many specific issues unresolved. Both sides sought to define the northern boundary for New Spain. At Nootka Sound, the diplomatic representative of New Spain, Juan Francisco de la Bodega y Cuatro, proposed a boundary at the Strait of Juan de Fuca, but the British representative, George Vancouver, refused to accept any boundary north of San Francisco. No agreement could be reached, and the northern boundary of New Spain remained unspecified until Adams on his treaty with the United States in 1890. The treaty also ceded Spanish Florida to the United States. Now we know how the United States got Florida. So the end of the Viceroyalty. The Third Treaty of San Ildefonso ceded to France the vast territory that Napoleon then sold to the United States in 1803, known as the Louisiana Purchase. Free says an agreement between two men led to an international incident. That must have been some incident. Yeah. We'll cover that incident shortly. The United States obtained Spanish Florida in 1819 in the Adams-Onis Treaty. The treaty also defined a northern border for New Spain at the 42nd North, now the northern boundary of the United States of California, Nevada, and Utah. In the 1821 Declaration of Independence of Mexican Empire, both Mexico and Central America declared their independence after 3 centuries of Spanish rule and formed the first Mexican Empire, although Central America quickly rejected the union. After priest Miguel Hidalgo y Cotillas in 1810, Guido de Dolores called for the independence. The insurgent army began an 11-year war. At first, the Criollo class fought against the rebels, but in 1820, a military coup in Spain forced Fernando VII to accept the authority of the liberal Spanish constitution. Hold on, Doodle Vision says, whoa, what is Utah? German lady from Wild Wild West. Okay, You're gonna have to clarify what you mean, Dude Vision. Uta. What is Uta? The German lady from the Wild Wild West. I don't know what you mean.
During all these conflicts, that these Acadians started moving out west too. You know them better as these Mormons or Latter Day Saints. Continue. Go ahead.
Wow. Okay. Um, the specter of liberalism that could undermine the authority of the autonomy of Roman Catholic churches made the church hierarchy in New Spain very view independence in a different light. In an independent nation, the church anticipated retaining its power. Royalist military officer Augustin de Iturbide proposed uniting with the insurgents with whom he had battled and gained the alliance of Vicente Guerrero, leader of the insurgents in a region now bearing his name. Royal government collapsed in New Spain, and the army of three guarantees marched triumphantly into Mexico City in 1821. The new Mexican Empire offered the crown to Ferdinand VII or to a member of the Spanish royal family that he would designate. After the refusal of the Spanish monarchy to recognize the independence of Mexico, the Ejército Gigante, Army of the Three Guarantees, led by Agustin de Iturbide and Vincent Guerrero, cut all political and economic ties with Spain and crowned Iturbide as Emperor Augustine of Mexico. Central America was originally planned to be part of the Mexican Empire, but it seceded peacefully in 1823, forming the United Province of Central America under the Constitution of 1824. This left only Cuba and Puerto Rico in the Spanish West Indies and the Spanish East Indies in the Spanish Empire until their loss to the United States in the Spanish-American War of 1898. So basically, Spain lost almost all its territory nearly, a century and a half later?
Yep.
Mm-mm-mm. So,
But the Spanish Empire got broken up around this time. Got way smaller.
very small. Almost to the fact by the time you get to the 1920s and 30s, it doesn't even exist.
Yep.
So, political organization. The Viceroyalty of New Spain united many regions and provinces of the Spanish Empire. Throughout half a world, these included the Northern American mainland, Central Mexico, Nueva Extremadura, Nueva Galicia, Californias, Nueva Vizcaya, Nuevo Reino de Leon, Texas, and Nuevo Santander, as well as Captaincy General of Guatemala. In the Caribbean, it included Cuba, Santo Domingo, most of Venezuelan mainland, and the other islands in the Caribbean controlled by the Spanish. In Asia, the Pacific region, the outpost of Nootka Sound or Vancouver Island, was considered part of the province of California. Therefore, the Viceroyalty's former territories included what is now the countries of Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Belize, Costa Rica, the United States regions of California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Puerto Rico, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Florida, a portion of the Canadian province of British Columbia, the Caribbean nations of Cuba, Dominican Republic, the island of Hispaniola, Jamaica, Antigua, and Barbuda, the Asian Pacific, Barbados. That's what that is.
Yeah, that's what it became, Barbados.
Oh, okay. The Asian Pacific nations of Philippine Islands, Palau, and Caroline Islands. Yes, all that was once under the power of Spain. The viceroyalty was administered by a viceroy residing in New Mexico and appointed by a Spanish monarch, who had administrative oversight of all these regions, although most matters were handled by the local governmental bodies, which ruled the various regions of the viceroyalty. First among these were the audiencias, which were primarily superior tribunals, but which also had administrative and legislative functions. Each of these was responsible to the Viceroy of New Spain in administrative matters, though not in judicial ones, but they also answered directly to the Council of the Indies. Audiencia districts further incorporated the older, smaller divisions known as governorates, which had been originally established by conquistador governors known as adelantados. Provinces which were under military threat were grouped into captaincies general, such as Captaincies General of the Philippines, established in 1574, and Guatemala, established in 1609, mentioned above, which were joint military and political commands with a certain level of autonomy. The Viceroy was Captain General of those provinces that remained directly under his command. At the local level, there were over 200 districts in both Indian and Spanish areas, which were headed by either the corregidor, also known as the alcalde mayor, or a bildo, town council, both of which had judicial administrative powers. In the late 18th century, the Bourbon dynasty began phasing out the corregidores and introduced intendants, whose broad fiscal powers cut into the authority of the viceroys, governors, and cabildos. Despite their late creation, those tendencies so affected the formation of the regional identity that they became the basis for the nations of Central America and the first Mexican states after independence. Whew. Audiencias. High courts or audiencias were established in major areas of Spanish settlement in New Spain. The High Court was established in 1527 prior to the establishment of the viceroyalty. The first audiencia was headed by Hernan Cortes' rival Nuño de Guzman, who used the court to deprive Cortes of power and property. The first audiencia was dissolved and the second audiencia established. Audiencias with dates of creation. Santo Domingo, 1511, effective 1526, predated the viceroyalty. Mexico, 1527, predated the viceroyalty. Panama, first one, 1538 to 1543. Guatemala, 1543. Guadalajara, 1548. Manila, 1583. Autonomous captaincies generals, with dates of creation. Santo Domingo, 1535. Philippines, 1574. Puerto Rico, 1580. Cuba, 1607, which later included Spanish Florida or La Florida and Spanish Louisiana in North America. Guatemala, 1609. Yucatan, 1617. Comandancy General of the Province Internans, 1776, analogous to a dependent captaincy general. Then they talk about the intendancies. As part of the sweeping 18th century administration and economic changes known as Bourbon reforms, the Spanish crown created new administrative units called intendancies. In New Spain, these units generally corresponded to the regions or provinces that had developed early in the center, south, and north. In turn, many of the intendancy boundaries became Mexican state boundaries after independence. So here are the intendancies: Havana, New Orleans, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Chiapas, Guatemala, San Salvador, Comayagua, Leon, Puerto Príncipe, Santiago de Cuba, Guanajuato, Valladolid, Guadalajara, Zacatecas, San Luis Potis, or Potosi, Veracruz, Puebla, Oaxaca, Durango, Sonora, Marina. And I'm not repeating those. So then it goes on to break down the regions of colonial Mexico centers and their peripheries, Mexico City, capital, and the viceroyalty. So basically, at the turn of the 19th century, the viceroyalty of Spain loses most of its territory to either France, United States, or Britain. So anything y'all want to say about this before we get back to the Cherokee War? Now I definitely see how we were definitely pawns that being moved around, and the board has been literally moved around up under our feet. It's worse than an earthquake. You had earth moving. The earth moved. They actually moved states up under your feet.
Well, you can see how they actually split tribes this way.
Mm-hmm.
For 20 years, you were loyal to this one. Then out of the blue, you got a new boss. But you don't know you got a new boss. We got some new rules. Some people are going to be like, well, we don't want the new boss. We're going to stick with the old boss.
Because considering a lot of them have been married in already.
Mm-hmm. But no, we don't want no new friends. No new friends. No new friends. Basically, now you can see why tribes were split in 3 ways, and eventually they split 6 ways.
Yeah.
Then depending on who you interacted with and had children with, there's another split and another split and another split. Now we get to 2019 where everybody a damn individual.
Judo Vision says, didn't J.J. Evans get shot by the Vice Lords? Yeah.
Yes, he sure did. And he milked it.
and that's why I keep going back and saying, check these records. Go back to the church, whatever church is of that country. Because, for example, I have ancestors that names literally changed depending upon who was ruling that land. I have one that she was Petrona, and then her name switched to Paula, which is French. So then you know the French took over. Same person, name changed. That one literally was named Juan, and then it changed to John, British. Same person, same information, name change. So this is why we have to be careful and make sure, oh, this may not be my people, but go check back with that church. Because I've traced myself back all the way back to the 1500s based upon the Catholic Church and their records. And all those places you would name them, Puebla, Tlaxcala, all the rest of them down there in Mesoamerica, they kept records of the Catholic Church. And now you're starting to see a lot of us that were moved around and they would call, oh, they brought in these slaves. No, they were bringing in the troops. They were not slaves. They were bringing in troops. So yes, if they're out there working in the field and doing all of that, it is to bring in food for the forts that they were building. So they're chopping down trees, they're building all this stuff. These were soldiers being brought in. So that's when they say, "Oh, these were Africans." And you notice they, if you read a segment, Brother Thomas, early, and they said, "Oh, these freed slaves." They always try to throw that in every single time. These were soldiers. Like I said, you're gonna keep seeing how it keeps going on. It's gonna lead up to the Buffalo Soldiers. Don't believe the hype that these were African Americans that were brought over here. And again, why are you going to give your slaves guns? Why are you going to allow your slaves to defend you? They will be the first one to shoot you. Think about it. I yield the mic.
Makes sense, like you said, like Free says, total sense in proper context, and that's why understanding this history, this world history, because it has a major effect on us. Because the United States, Britain, France, and Spain were basically swapping lands. Mm-mm-mm. Free says tribes were dismantled and turned into happy families equal, an amalgamation of animals of diverse habits and propensities living amicably or at least quietly together in one cage. Doodle Vision says land swap, dot dot dot, wife swap. Alright, now it's time to get back to the Cherokee War, Cherokee American War. That's where we started, right? Do this. He said there's only 3 people in the chat, but 80 some people listening. It's all good. Maybe they just processing. That's all I'm gonna chalk it up to. So now we're back at the Cherokee American War. I'm putting a link in here. And we didn't get that far before we hit Viceroyalty of New Spain. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and read. Basically, I'm gonna pick up at the second phase of the Cherokee War. The second phase lasted from 1783 to 1794, in which the Cherokee served as proxies of the Viceroyalty of New Spain against the recently formed United States of America, because of their relocation westward to new homes initially known as the 5 Lower Towns. They then became known as the Lower Cherokee, a moniker which persisted well into the 19th century. In 1786, the Lower Cherokee became founding members of the Native Americans Western Confederacy, organized by Mohawk leader Joseph Brant, and took an active part in the Northwest Indian War. Bones, there go that name again.
This dude everywhere. He works in Visa and American Express.
Oak Cliff says, this guy. So the Lower Creek became founding members of the Native Americans Western Confederacy, organized by Mohawk leader Joseph Brant, and took an active part in the Western Indian War. So what is the Western Confederacy? Let me click, put it in
those the ones that made allegiance with the British?
Well, I'm about to read it. I put the link in the chat. It says the Western Confederacy, or Western Indian Confederacy, was a loose confederacy of Native Americans in the Great Lakes region of the United States following the American Revolutionary War. The Confederacy was also sometimes known as the Miami Confederacy, as many federal officials at this time overestimated the influence and numerical strength of the Miami tribe within the Confederation. Grand Rising Macadam. The Confederacy, which had its roots in pan-tribal movements dating to the 1740s, came together in an attempt to resist the expansion of the United States and the encroachment of the American settlers into the Northwestern Territory after Great Britain ceded the region to the United States in 1783 Treaty of Paris. So remember, that treaty was what came with the land swap. The resistance resulted in the Northwest Indian War, 1785 through 1795, which ended with an American military victory at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, though it was rekindled by Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet, and his brother Tecumseh. Remember, they were strong Pan-Indians.
Not them Pan-Indians.
Yeah, them Pan-Indians. Although many of the native peoples had fought in the Revolutionary War as British allies, Great Britain made no mention of their allies in the Treaty of Paris. According to Joseph Brant, a Mohawk chief who was one of the early architects of the Confederacy, the British had sold the Indians to Congress. The Confederacy first came together in 1786 at a conference at the Wyandotte town of Upper Sandusky with the intention of forming a common front in the dealing with the Americans. After 1792, the Confederacy received support from John Gray Simcoe, the British Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada. Free says, Great Lakes region, Miami Confederacy equals Miami, Ohio. Yeah, he said Miami, Ohio, not Miami, Florida.
Yeah, because you gotta remember, Ohio not as old as people think it is.
Members of many different tribes were involved in the Western Confederacy. However, because most tribes were not centralized political units at the time, involvement in the Confederacy was usually on a village rather than a tribal basis. The Confederacy consisted of members of the following tribes: Wyandotte, Miami, Shawnee, Lenape, also known as the Delaware, Council of Three Fires, Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe. Wabash Confederacy, which are the Wea, Piankashaw, and others. Sauk, Muscogee, Six Nations, which were the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, Tuscarora, and smaller groups like the Tutelo and Nanticoke. Seven Nations of Canada.
Why it sound like the ones Iroquois kicked out? I'm just saying.
Yeah, you breaking up, Bones.
It sounded like all tribes that the Iroquois kicked out of this band.
Bro, you sounded really bad. Can you change locations? Yeah, that's a lot better. Seven Nations Canada, Mohawk, Algonquin, Nipissing, Abenaki, and Wendat. Illinois Confederacy, Kaskaskia, Cahokia, Peoria, and others. Mingo, Trans-Appalachian Cayuga, and Seneca splinter groups. Menominee, and Kickapoo. Those are all the confederacies. Those are all the tribes that consist in that confederacy. The Confederacy was also periodically supported by communities and warriors from West Mississippi River and south of the Ohio River, including the Dakota, Chickamauga, Cherokee, and Upper Creek, not Upper Creek. Oak Cliff Tiss says Anunnaki sounds like Anunnaki. So that was the Western Confederacy. Now back to the war itself. The conflict ended in 1794 with the Treaty of Tellico Blockhouse. The Northwest Indian War, in which the Cherokee were also involved, ended with the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. Notice how all these treaties are coming about. There was a lot of treaties that happened before the 1800s. So then they give you a prelude. The French and Indian War and the related European theater conflict known as the 7 Years' War laid many of the foundations for the conflict between Cherokee and the American settlers on the frontier. These tensions on the frontier broke out into open hostilities with the advent of the American Revolution. The action of the French and Indian War in North America included the Anglo-Cherokee War lasting 1758 to 1761. British forces under General Grant destroyed a number of major Cherokee towns, which were never reoccupied. Kittiwah was abandoned, and its former residents migrated west. They took up residence in Mealakua, called Great Island Town and Little Tennessee River, among OVO Cherokee. Copper Color Queen said Joseph Brant, again, he's been a chess piece on the entire land. Yeah. Let's see who we have coming in. Alright, so we have, let's see. So I'm still at the aftermath of the French and Indian War. So it's at the end of this conflict, the Cherokee signed the Treaty of Long Island on the Holston with the colony of Virginia and the Treaty of Charleston with the province of South Carolina. Konokotoko, Standing Turkey, the first beloved man during this conflict, was replaced by Atakulakula, who was pro-British. Valuing the support of Native Americans, King George III issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763. This prohibited colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, in which an effort to preserve territory for the native tribes. Many colonists resented the interference with their drive to the vast western lands. The proclamation was a major irritant to the colonists, contributing to their support for the American Revolution and Indian interference by the crown. So now we're starting to see another cause for the American Revolution.
Doodle like when Cherokee was crossing over like AI in his prime.
That's funny. Alright, trying to get my bearings back. So, let's look at the treaties and land secessions. So, to resolve the problem of settlers living beyond the line established in various treaties, John Stewart, as superintendent of the Southern Indian Affairs, negotiated a treaty signed on October 17, 1768. With the Cherokee surrendering their claims to the colony of Virginia, to the land between the Allegheny Mountains and the Ohio River essentially. It covered what is now West Virginia and eastern Kentucky with a bit of southwest corner of Pennsylvania. After the Potomac Wars, 1763 to 1764, the Iroquois Confederacy ceded to the British government its claims to the hunting grounds between Ohio and Cumberland Rivers, known to them and other Indians as Kaintuki, which is what they call Kentucky, in the 1768 Treaty of Fort Stanwix. In 1769, developers and land speculators planned to start a new colony called Vandalia in the territory ceded by the Cherokee. He says, check under the rubble, we may have bodies. I know, right? Plans fell through, however, and Virginia annexed it as a district of West Augusta in 1774. On June 1st, 1773, the Cherokee and the Muskogee ceded their claims to 2 million acres in the northern sector of the Georgia colony in return for the cancellation of their debts. Whoa. What kind of debts did they have where they had to cede over 2 million acres of land? Was this because of taxes? I guess that would be it.
Could be.
Most of the Muskogee refused to recognize the treaty and the British government rejected it. In Dunmore's War of 1774, the next year, Daniel Boone led a group to establish a temporary settlement inside the hunting grounds of modern-day Kansas. In retaliation, the Shawnee Lenape, aka the Delaware, Mingo, and some Cherokee attacked a scouting and forage party, which included Boone's son James. James Boone and Henry Russell, a member of one of the two parties, were captured by the Native Americans and ritually tortured to death. The colonists responded with the beginning of Dunmore's War, 1773 to 1774. The Cherokee and the Muskogee were active also, mainly confining themselves to small raids on the backcountry settlements of the Carolinas and Georgia. Early colonial settlements in Upper East Tennessee, 1768 to 1772. The earliest colonial settlement in the vicinity of what became Upper East Tennessee was Snapling Grove. The first of the north of Halston settlements, it was founded by Evan Shelby, who purchased the land in 1768 from John Buchanan. Jacob Brown began another settlement on the Nolichucky River, and John Carter another in what became known as Carter's Valley, between Clinch Valley and Beach Creek. Both in 1771, following the Battle of Alamance in 1771. James Robertson led a group of some 12 or 13 regulated families from the North Carolinas to the Watauga River. Each of the groups, though they were within the territorial limits of the colony of Virginia, after a survey proved their mistake. Alexander Cameron, Deputy Superintendent for Indian Affairs, ordered them to leave Atakulakula, first beloved principal chief of the Cherokee, interceded on their behalf. The settlers were allowed to remain, provided no additional people joined them. On May 8, 1772, the settlers of the Watauga and the Nolichucky signed a Watauga Compact to form the Watauga Association. Henderson Purchase, 1775. That's my dad's mother's maiden name, Henderson. On March 17, 1775, a group of North Carolina speculators led by Richard Henderson negotiated the Treaty of Watauga at Sycamore Shoals with the older Overhill Cherokee leaders Akanostota and Takuakula. The most prominent ceded the claim of the Cherokee to the Kentucky lands. The Transylvania Land Company believed it was gaining ownership of the land, not realizing that other tribes such as the Lenape, Shawnee, and Chickasaw also claimed these lands for hunting. Sorry. Documented Cherokee towns like Sullen Possum in southeast Kentucky and the other areas of Kentucky did exist with links to what is called the Overhill Towns and other Cherokee towns. Dragon Canoe, headman of Great Island Town and son of Takulakula, refused to go along with the deal. He told the North Carolina men, "You have brought a fair land, but there is a cloud hanging over it. You will find this settlement dark and bloody. The governors of Virginia and North Carolina repudiated the Watauga Treaty, and Henderson fled to avoid arrest. George Washington also spoke out against it. The Cherokee appealed to John Stuart, the Indian Affairs Superintendent, for help, which he had provided on previous such occasions, but the outbreak of the American Revolution intervened. Henderson, a frontiersman, thought the outbreak of the revolutionaries suspended the judgments of the royal governors. The Transylvania Company began recruiting settlers for the region they had purchased. How is it that they're still trying to recruit people and settling on land when there's a revolutionary war going on? Can somebody explain that to me? No? Okay.
You're on to something.
Revolutionary War purchased Cherokee War 1776. During the Revolutionary War, the Cherokee not only fought against the settlements in the Over Mountain region and later in the Cumberland Basin, defended against territory encroachment, they also fought as allies of Great Britain against its rebellious subjects. British strategy was focused on the north and not so much on the backwoods settlements, especially those in the west. The Cherokee, therefore, were on their own, except for supplies from British ports on the coast and some joint operations in South Carolina. When was the 7-Year War again? Hold on. Give me a second. So the 7-Year War took place between 1754 and 1763. And then literally 4 years after that, in 1776, the Revolutionary War broke out. Why does that sound fishy to me?
You're gonna find out again. Proxy, crash test dummies. You're gonna find out more so that the war was between the Cherokee on one side of the Appalachian Mountains and all the other tribes that were to the east of the Appalachian Mountains. Because remember, the Boston Tea Party, what did the colonists do?
They dressed
up as what?
they dressed up as Indians.
And dumped the tea. And remember, the Cherokee were allies with the British. Keep going.
Fight of the Loyalists, or Flight of the Loyalists. As tensions rose, Loyalist John Stuart, British Superintendent of Indian Affairs, was besieged by a mob at his house in Charleston and had to flee for his life. Excuse me. His first stop was St. Augustine in East Florida. Another noted loyalist, after associated with the Cherokee, Thomas Brown, was not nearly as fortunate. In his home of Brownsboro, Georgia, near Augusta, he was assaulted by a crowd of the Sons of Liberty, tied to a tree, roasted with fire, scalped, tarred and feathered. After his escape, he took up residence among the... Wait a minute. He was tied to a tree, roasted with fire, scalped. Huh?
Yeah, I'm just listening to everything you just said. I'm like, this is a tough dude.
And then it says, after his escape, he took up residence among the Seminole, commanding his East Florida Rangers, who fought with him in some of the lower Musket. How do you get scout and then you can still? Never mind. That's the same thing I said. Free. He survived. From St. Augustine, Stewart sent his deputy Alexander Cameron and his brother Henry to Mobile to obtain short-term supplies and arms for the Cherokee. Dragon Canoe took a party of 80 warriors to provide security for the pack train. He met Henry Stewart and Cameron, who he had adopted as a brother, at Mobile on March 1st, 1776. He asked how he could help the British against their rebel subjects and for help with the illegal settlers. The two men told him to wait for regular troops to arrive before taking any action. When the two arrived at Chota, Henry Stewart sent out letters to the frontier settlers. He affirmed them that they were illegally on Cherokee land and gave them 40 days to leave. That's a long time to give somebody to leave, unless it takes that long to leave the territory. In an exercise of propaganda, people sympathetic to the revolution forged a letter to indicate a large force of regular troops plus Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Muskogee was on the march from Pensacola and planned to pick up reinforcements from the Cherokee. The forged letters alarmed the settlers, who began gathering together in closely fortified groups, building stations, small forts, and otherwise preparing for an attack. Visits from northern tribes. In May 1776, partly at the behest of Henry Hamilton, the British governor in Detroit, the Shawnee chief Cornstalk, led a delegation from the northern tribes, Shawnee, Lenape, Iroquois, Ottawa, others, to the southern tribes. He traveled to Chota to meet with the southern tribes, Cherokee, Muskogee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, about fighting with the British against their common enemy. Cornstalk called for the united action against those that they called the Long Knives, the squatters who settled and remained in Kentucky, or as the settlers called it, Transylvania. At the close of his speech, Cornstalk offered his war belt, and Dragon Canoe accepted. Dragon Canoe also accepted belts from the Ottawa and the Iroquois. To prepare themselves for the coming campaign, the Overhill Cherokee began raiding into Kentucky, often with the Shawnee. Before the northern delegation had left, Dragon Canoe led a small war party in Kentucky and returned with 4 scalps to present to Cornstalk before they departed. In another raid, a war party led by Hanging Maw captured 3 teenage settler girls, Jemima Boone and Elizabeth and Frances Calloway, on July 14th, but lost them 3 days later to a rescue party led by Daniel Boone, father of Jemima, and Richard Calloway, father of Elizabeth and Frances. The first Cherokee campaigns. In late June, war parties from the lower towns began attacking the frontier of South Carolina. On July 1st, the out, middle, and valley towns sent out war parties raiding the frontier settlements of North Carolina east of the Blue Ridge, coming down to the Catawba River. Meanwhile, traders warned the Over Mountain settlers of the impending attacks from the Overhill towns. They had come from Chota, bearing word from Nancy Ward, the beloved woman, leader or elder. The Cherokee offensive proved to be disastrous for the attackers. On July 3rd, a small war party of Cherokee besieged a small part on North Carolina's frontier. The garrison managed to keep from being overrun until a large body of militia arrived and a near besiegers, who then retreated.